Alexa was not favoured by fate from the beginning. She was born to a young mother who did not want a child. Tricia did not even know who the baby's father was. She would have gotten rid of the unwanted consequence of her free and fun life, not for the first time, but the doctor said it was too late. Upon learning of the impending addition, Alexa's grandmother, Lucille, only shook her head reproachfully. Many years ago, she and her husband unsuccessfully tried to get pregnant. Years went by. All of their friends and relatives had children, but she and her husband could not become parents. So, one day they decided to take a girl from an orphanage. Some tried to dissuade them, saying they did not know what genes a child had, and that they would not just end up in an orphanage, while others supported them in their decision. The woman didn't care at the time. Lucille dreamed of finally feeling like a mother, and when a 4-year-old, fair-haired girl ran up to her and hugged her, her heart melted. Even her husband, watching that touching scene, shed tears. That's how Tricia ended up in their family, and at first everything went really well. The girl was growing up, trying hard, pleasing them, and listening. Her foster mother, who had been waiting for a child for so long, finally felt useful and happy. Lucille cooked delicious meals for her daughter, bought her toys and stunning outfits, took her to the movies, and braided the little girl's beautiful blonde hair. The foster parents spoiled the long-awaited child. Many people noticed that, but Lucille and her husband just shrugged it off. Tricia has had a tough life. She was born into an unhappy family, lived in inhumane conditions until the age of 3, was treated poorly, and then went to an orphanage. Better, of course, than living with alcoholics, but still not a fairy tale. When Tricia was in the 7th grade, a tragedy occurred. Her loving foster father was killed by hooligans. It was a ridiculous accident. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The widow and teenage daughter were both struggling with the loss. Lucille couldn't come to terms with it for a long time, and when she finally overcame her despair, she noticed something was wrong. Her sweet, obedient daughter began turning into some kind of monster. She was no longer the same submissive, kind child. Foremost, Tricia completely stopped studying. No, she had never excelled academically, but she used to at least try. Now the girl had completely abandoned her studies and started skipping school. Tricia had strange friends, teenagers from clearly troubled families, some much older than the girl. The daughter now skipped school, cursed with indecent words, and was rude. She refused to help her mother with housework, constantly demanded money, threw tantrums, and frightened her. And then Lucille noticed that her daughter was taking things from the house. Things only got worse. The 13-year-old girl began allowing herself not to come home to sleep. Of course, Lucille was alarmed. She spent a lot of money on specialists, neurologists, and psychologists. There were no clear deviations found in Tricia, and that's how they used to live. Tricia kept coming home when she wanted. She dropped out of school after the 9th grade and didn't go on to study further. Why? She was completely satisfied with her life. Parties, meeting with friends, short-lived turbulent romances. The brazen girl demanded money from her mother, and if she didn't give it to her, she took it herself. Tricia expertly found hiding places. That's why, exhausted, Lucille was not at all happy with the news that she would soon become a grandmother. By that time, she had already understood the deep meaning of the expression, "The apple never falls far from the tree." Tricia gave birth to a healthy baby girl on time. She behaved like a model mother for a couple of months. It seemed like a miracle had happened. The baby made the young woman settle down and pull herself together. However, Tricia soon tired of motherhood, and once again, as she had done many times before, abandoned little Alexa to her grandmother and disappeared without a trace. Lucille knew that her daughter would eventually return, but when, in what condition, and why remained a mystery. Thus the grandmother took care of her granddaughter by herself. Alexa grew up sweet and kind, but Lucille, remembering Tricia at that age, was not quick to rejoice. Instead, she treated the little girl cautiously and with enough coldness. Alexa didn't remember her grandmother hugging her, telling her fairy tales, or buying her anything beyond what was necessary. Instead, the woman demanded unquestioning obedience from her granddaughter. The child had many duties, and their number increased from year to year: cooking, washing, and cleaning. Tricia periodically appeared on the horizon, but for some reason the girl gravitated towards her wayward mother. It seemed to her that Tricia would not be as cold toward her as her grandmother. Alexa asked her mother to take her with her, and Tricia promised to do so, but there were always reasons. Either she and her boyfriend rented a small apartment, or Tricia had another child, or something else. "You're not needed by her," the grandmother said angrily. "No one needs you except me, and you were born mistakenly to your partying mother." Alexa was hurt to hear such words, but as she got older, she understood that everything her grandmother said was the pure truth. Growing up, the girl realized that she really didn't need her mother, but her grandmother also raised her out of inertia without love because it was necessary. Otherwise, what would people say? Alexa did not see love, warmth, or care, although she was raised in normal conditions. Graduating from school, Alexa entered the same college that her grandmother had chosen for Tricia. It's not that the girl dreamt of becoming an accountant. She just couldn't go against the will of the person who raised her. She got used to obeying her grandmother on everything. It was here that she met Bill. A cute, cheerful young man immediately noticed the quiet, modest girl, but Alexa was not ready for such attention. At first, she couldn't believe that someone cared about her. It seemed to her that Bill was just joking when he talked about his sympathy. The guy had to work very hard to earn Alexa's trust. How happy the girl was with Bill. They walked a lot, talked, laughed, and rode on his motorcycle, given to him by his father for his coming of age. Bill took her to the movies and cafes. With him, Alexa came alive and felt needed, loved, and beautiful. Grandma didn't approve of these relationships, predicting the same fate as her daughter. She loved to have fun with men too. "He'll toss you around and leave you. You'll see." But Lucille's prophecy did not come true. Bill proposed to Alexa. They got married without a lavish celebration at the local registry office and started living together. A young man took a job as a long-distance trucker immediately after graduation, even though it wasn't in his field of study. The money was good, and he was now the head of the family. Tricia didn't even know her daughter had gotten married. During this time, she was building her personal life in another city. The grandmother was skeptical of this early marriage and predicted a quick end to the relationship. Even news of the birth of her great-granddaughter, Sherry, didn't thaw her calloused heart. "What's there to be happy about?" the elderly woman said, looking at the tiny girl in a blanket. "Bad genes are spreading further." Alexa took the offensive words calmly, as she was used to them, but Bill was furious. He took his daughter in his arms and carried her to another room, and he didn't come back until the old relative left. Soon the family grew with the arrival of another daughter, and then a third. Alexa was happy to immerse herself in motherhood. She couldn't understand her mother anymore. How could she leave her with a cold grandmother? How could she abandon such a miracle? Alexa adored her children. Bill was still working as a truck driver, and Alexa was taking care of their daughters. They had enough money for everything, including rent, groceries, and entertainment. The young families spent their weekends having fun. They went to the movies, amusement parks, and cafes. The girls grew up, pleasing their parents. All three sisters were obedient, smart, and healthy. Alexa hardly communicated with her mother and grandmother, only when necessary. But when her grandmother fell ill, the young woman was there for her, although it was difficult for her to take care of the children and the elderly woman. She managed. She couldn't leave the person who raised her. There were disagreements between them, but Lucille still didn't give up her granddaughter to an orphanage. Lucille passed away on a cold November day. Alexa took care of all the organizational matters and tried to contact her mother about what had happened, but couldn't find her. Tricia appeared on her own 6 months later when it was time to inherit. She became the sole owner of the apartment and the rest of Lucille's property. The woman didn't seem to be saddened by the fact that her adoptive mother had passed away. She was even happy. Finally, she could move her new boyfriend and her children into the spacious vacant apartment. Meeting her mother, Alexa realized they were complete strangers. Tricia didn't feel any familial feelings toward her, and Alexa, looking at the woman who had clearly suffered through life and neglected her children, suddenly realized how lucky she was that her mother had abandoned her with her grandmother and didn't take her on this strange journey through life. Of course, she felt bitter, but Alexa didn't despair. Everything was good in her life: a loving and caring husband, a cozy, clean home, and 3 wonderful daughters. Although her husband adored their girls, he dreamed of having a son. Alexa wasn't against having another child. She enjoyed being a mother and found pleasure in communicating with babies. The girls had grown up a little, so the spouses decided to try. Bill took the news of another pregnancy enthusiastically. They even celebrated this event at a restaurant. Watching her husband's happy face and feeling the warmth of new life inside her, Alexa realized that her life was fulfilled. Around her were loving, close people. What else did she need for happiness? During the summer, the family had 2 sons, Jack and Tim. Yes, it was not easy for the spouses, especially for Alexa. It was hard to cope with the babies when her husband left for work. But the oldest daughter, 12-year-old Sherry, tried to help her mother with everything. When the twins were a few weeks old, one of them, Jack, was found to have an earnest heart defect that would require expensive surgery in the future. "Collect money," warned the doctor. "After a year, you'll have to go to Germany for the operation. We don't do it here. This is the only chance for your son to live." Alexa left the doctor's office on shaky legs. She looked at her baby and couldn't believe that something was wrong with him. He looked just as lively, strong, and healthy as his brother. Bill then calmed her down, supported her, and said that he would work more and go on more flights. "We will raise the necessary sum for Jack. We still have plenty of time," the man promised. And in the fall, a disaster struck the family. Bill had an accident on the road. Alexa found herself completely alone with 5 young children, one of whom was seriously ill. Without support, without help, without plans for the future. Alexa went through a terrible event, but she had to take care of her children. There was simply no time or energy for despair, and only before going to bed, putting the little ones to sleep, the woman allowed herself to cry a little. Tears brought temporary relief, and then the main question arose again: how to live on. Alexa didn't really have a profession. Yes, she had received an education, but she had never worked a day after graduation. Bill provided for the family, so the woman devoted herself entirely to the children. At that time, such an arrangement seemed perfect. It was thought that this stability would last forever. Alexa received all possible benefits for children from the government, so there was enough money for food and clothing. But they also needed to rent an apartment, and Jack needed medication all the time. The woman quickly realized that they couldn't afford to stay in the city. Renting an apartment was exorbitantly expensive for their budget, but now the main problem was the operation for her son. Where do I get the money? She couldn't save up from benefits alone. A considerable sum was needed. Doctors advised her to turn to a fund. Alexa did just that, but the collection was going too slowly. Hopes that she would raise the necessary sum on time were diminishing. And then help came from a completely unexpected place. One day, a woman called Alexa introduced herself as a notary and arranged a meeting. Alexa did not want to go. She would have to leave the babies with Sherry again, and there were many things to do at home, and there would probably be some formalities related to her deceased husband. Nothing important, but she went anyway. What she heard shocked her. It turned out that in a remote village, her grandmother's cousin had left this world, and she bequeathed her house to the young relative who had fallen into dire straits. Alexa remembered this elderly woman. She saw her 3 times in her life when she came to visit Lucille. Rachel always treated Alexa kindly, never forgot to bring treats with her, for which she received a non-serious but still stern scolding from her grandmother. The will was accompanied by a letter. In it, Rachel said that she wanted to help the poor young widow with 5 children in any way she could, and expressed the hope that her house would become a reliable home and haven for them. "Live in it for a long and happy life, just like I and my husband did," were the closing lines of the warm letter. Alexa couldn't believe what was happening. The house came into their hands exactly when they needed it the most. It was nothing short of a miracle. The woman felt immense gratitude towards Rachel, especially since the entire family knew that Tricia was taken from an orphanage by Lucille, which meant that Alexa was essentially a nobody to Rachel. The rent for the apartment was due soon, and the landlord was used to taking payments 6 months in advance. Alexa certainly didn't have that kind of money, but now she didn't need it anymore. Within a week she would gather the children and they would go to the remote village, to their new home. Yes, we will have to live in the village. Alexa couldn't imagine what it would be like, but she was sure she would manage, especially since she had no other choice. The family arrived in the village when it was raining, and the clay road had softened so much that the vehicle got stuck in the mud several times. "What terrible roads!" exclaimed the driver. "This is such a remote place." The guy was right. The village was far from the city, but it looked very well kept and cosy. The appearance of the new abode pleased Alexa. It was a big, beautiful house with green walls and a wonderful garden. It was clear that the previous owners had loved and cared for it. Alexa was now determined to take over this relay. "How great that the house is so spacious. We can make separate rooms for the boys and girls. This is just wonderful." The truck left deep tracks in the mud as it drove away. However, the rain was so heavy that it soon washed them away from the road. It wasn't until evening that the sky cleared up and the streams of water pouring from the sky subsided. Alexa had a lot of work to do. First, she fed the children with sandwiches that she had prepared in advance and gave them tea from a thermos. Then she began to sort out their belongings. The 1-year-old twins tried not to get in the way. Having arrived at a new place, they looked around in amazement. One of the brothers suddenly smiled at someone behind Alexa. The woman turned around, but there was no one there. Strangely, the second boy also stared into that corner and giggled. Alexa continued to sort out their belongings without paying attention to them. The house was old but sturdy, clean and well made. Interesting items from past eras were everywhere. An old floor watch, old books with yellowed pages, embroidered pillows, vintage lamps. Something told Alexa that she might even find rare specimens in the attic and basement. I'll look into that later. The house was furnished with sturdy furniture that might well last for a long time, and that was wonderful. There was no money for interior renovation anyway. The problem was with the beds. There were only 2 in the house, plus a sofa and a couch. It was a good thing that Alexa had brought an inflatable mattress. The younger ones would sleep on the beds, and she and Sherry would sleep on the floor for now. The day passed by with worries and troubles. Evening arrived and Alexa went to the kitchen. While crawling under the table, searching for a socket, she stumbled upon an interesting item. A round clock with a hinged lid on a long chain. The item looked luxurious. It seemed to be made of pure silver, although she could be wrong. I wonder how it ended up in this sturdy but generally not rich house. And why are these luxurious clocks lying on the floor? It's really strange. Alexa pressed the button on the clock case and the lid opened, revealing an ornate inscription on the inner side. "To my dear Saviour, in eternal memory." Alexa put the clock in her bag. It was a very valuable item, and she could get good money for it for the operation. Someone must have held these silver clocks dear as a memory, as they were clearly taken care of and looked brand new, polished to a shine. She wondered who this saviour was, and for what deed this person was rewarded with such a gift, and how did the clocks end up in a rural house under the table. The children reminded her that they were hungry, so Alexa began to prepare a simple dinner on the electric stove, distracted from her thoughts. The woman was grateful to the almost unknown Rachel, who pitied her and got the house for her. After putting the children to bed, Alexa looked at the clock again. What were they luring her with? It was difficult to explain, but looking at the shiny object made her feel calm and warm, feeling exhausted from the move and the worries and anxieties that came with it. Alexa put the clock in her bag and lay down on the mattress next to her eldest daughter. Sleep overtook her before she even laid her head on the pillow. Boom, boom. A loud knock shook the house, and Alexa jumped in fright. Someone was breaking in, but the children continued to sleep peacefully. Even the usually sensitive twins were snoring peacefully on the wide bed. Boom, boom. The knock did not subside, and Alexa was scared. She was alone with young children in an unfamiliar place, and someone was knocking on their door at night. Clearly, this will not end well, but hiding is not an option either, as the stranger could easily break down the door. On cotton wool legs, Alexa walked to the door and opened it. In the threshold, she saw a thin old man with a long grey beard, wearing a patched quilted jacket and sweatpants, with high rubber boots on his feet like fishermen wear. Behind the gate, an old car was visible, which looked like a Ford Model T. Alexa had never seen these in the city, but here in the countryside it must have been normal. Alexa looked at the night guest. His face was welcoming, his smile friendly, and his eyes kind. There was no danger from the visitor. Alexa calmed down a little. But how did he manage to open the gate? And how did the old man manage to knock so hard that the whole house was shaking? He didn't seem that strong. "Hello, hostess," the visitor greeted Alexa. "Wishing you happiness and health in your home." "Thank you," the woman replied. "Who are you?" "I'm John Grady." The old man introduced himself. "I was passing through the village and got stuck at your house. My acquaintances used to live here, so I came in to warm up. Out of habit, probably." Alexa wondered why an old man would travel at such an hour, but the rest seemed plausible. Indeed, it had recently rained and the road was muddy. It was not difficult to get stuck in such mud, and the old man could well have been familiar with the previous residents of this house. "Come in," she invited him. "You really should warm up. The night is cold and the road is tough." "Thank you." The guest bowed and removed his boots on the porch, then walked barefoot straight to the kitchen. He clearly knew what and where things were. Apparently he had been to this house before. "Sit down." Alexa politely pushed a chair for the old man. He obediently sat down. Alexa turned on the kettle. It was cold outside, and the guest clearly needed a warming drink. "This is a good house," said John Grady, thoughtfully propping his chin with his hand. He looked around with warmth in his eyes, scanning the walls, furniture and ceiling. "Yes, we like it too. We just arrived here today and are settling in. Rachel left it to me as an inheritance. Did you know her?" "Of course I knew her." The old man smiled. "She was a kind and good woman. If she left her house to you, then you're a good person too. You'll be happy here." "I hope so," sighed Alexa. "A lot has happened in my life lately, but when we arrived here, it felt so easy and joyful." "That's good," the guest said. "It means the house likes you." "You speak strangely." The woman smiled. The kettle boiled and she poured the fragrant drink into the cups. "The house isn't alive." "Well," the old man smiled mysteriously, "this house has a history, and the village itself has a history, and the previous residents too. I'll tell you if you like." Alexa was surprised at herself. She was sitting in the kitchen with a stranger, far beyond midnight, listening to his speech and feeling more and more calm. Troubling thoughts about the future, which had been haunting her since her husband's death, somehow receded unnoticed, and she felt light and warm inside. The old man's voice sounded like a pleasant, soothing melody, and he kept talking, telling the story of the village. It was discovered that a wealthy man had previously lived in this place before the war. He had a single daughter, whom he adored. One day, while swimming in the river with her friends, she was caught in the current and began to drift away. A fisherman sitting nearby noticed that. The other girls were playing and hadn't realized their friend was in danger. The young man quickly came to her rescue and pulled her out of the water. He almost drowned himself in the process, but managed to get out alive. The girl told her father everything, and he went to the young man, knelt before him, and gave him a silver watch as a reward. The lid of the watch was engraved with an inscription. This saviour was the father of Rachel's husband. He cherished the watches his whole life. They were precious to him, like a memory. "But I found them!" exclaimed Alexa. The woman pulled out the watch she had found under the table the day before from her purse. The old man looked at them, and a happy smile spread across his face. "Yes, exactly. They're priceless. And not just because they're made of silver and gold. This is the work of a famous craftsman. The artwork itself is worth a fortune." "I was going to pawn them," Alexa thought to herself. "I would have given away such a unique piece of art for next to nothing." These watches are meant to save someone else, someone innocent, just as their owner once did. The old man continued his smooth, monotonous speech, going on at length about Rachel's family, and Alexa fell asleep, lulled by the night guest's soothing and rhythmic story. The next morning she woke up to the dawn breaking outside. It wasn't a pleasant awakening. She looked around thoughtfully and realized she was alone in the room. Had she dreamed everything? The knocking on the door, the old Ford outside the gate, the talkative old man. But the second cup of untouched tea on the table told her otherwise. Alexa tried to remember if the stranger had drunk any of the hot drink. It seemed like he hadn't. He had been talking the whole time. Alexa went outside to check the area around the house. It was empty, and she found no tire tracks on the wet clay road. This was impossible. Yesterday the car was parked by the gate, and there was no rain, so there had to be tire marks. How strange. She went back inside, took out her phone, and launched the browser. She decided to fact-check the stories the night guest had told her about the village. Everything checked out, even though she hadn't known any of it before. Everything was so strange. The children woke up, but Alexa continued her usual morning routine of preparing breakfast, cleaning up and planning her day. She couldn't shake off the strange dream. Or was it not a dream after all? The nighttime incident still lingered in her mind. At lunch, Alexa went up to the attic to explore. Among the broken furniture, bales of old clothes and bundles of books with yellowed pages, she found a chubby photo album filled with black and white photos. Alexa carefully studied the faces of the people who were probably no longer alive. Back then, a photo shoot was an elaborate event. The family would prepare themselves beautifully, dress up, and carefully choose the time. Nowadays it's different and everyone can take hundreds of photos with their smartphones. In one of the photos, the same nighttime guest was looking at her. Mr. Grady. It was really him, as indicated by the inscription made by someone in 1973. He was already an old man, roughly the same age as the one who came to her at night. The eyes were the same and even the smile. Alexa examined the album and the inscriptions to the photos more closely and understood who Mr. Grady was. He was the father of Rachel's husband, and it was he who, in his youth, saved the drowning daughter of a rich man, and his watch was now in Alexa's bag. What did he mean by, "they have to save someone else"? Maybe the nighttime guest meant Jack. Alexa knew that Rachel had been a widow for a long time. Her husband was older than her and had left this world much earlier, and her father-in-law was even older and had been gone for decades, and yet Alexa was sure that she saw him last night. "Mum, someone came to us." Sherry's voice was heard from below. Alexa hurried downstairs. Who came to them? Maybe Mr. Grady again? She had so many questions for him this time. Alexa was not afraid of meeting the unknown, because the nighttime guest emanated a very pleasant aura of calm and kindness. It was immediately clear that his intention was the best. But in the room, Alexa saw an unfamiliar elderly woman holding a fragrant steaming pie in her hands. "Hi, I am your neighbour. My name is Matilda Nichols," the woman introduced herself. "I came to get acquainted. I brought a pie. If you have children, let them enjoy my raspberry pie. My grandchildren adore it." Alexa invited the kind neighbour to the table. The children quickly drank tea, swallowed the treat in a blink of an eye, and went about their business, and the adults talked for a long time. Mrs. Nichols explained in detail where everything was located in the village: the store, school, and kindergarten. She even revealed that there would be soon a vacant position at the post office, as her relative was going on a well-deserved vacation. If Alexa needed a job, she would vouch for her, and the babies would be easily admitted to the nursery. "By the way, have you found anything interesting here?" the neighbour suddenly asked. "No." Alexa decided not to reveal all her cards, just in case. "Someone must have beaten you to it. The owner, the father-in-law of your relative Rachel, had a valuable item, silver watches. They were given to him by a local landowner. John Grady loved them so much, cherished them like a memory, and bequeathed them to his son, but there was no one left to pass them on to. Rachel and her husband didn't have any children, so the precious watches stayed in the house. Many people in the village knew about it. When Rachel died, people started visiting the house, searching for relics. Nobody found the watches, even though the entire house was searched. But it seems that someone took them after all. Oh, John Grady, may he rest in peace, used to say that these watches would save someone's life. I don't know where he got that from, but he didn't even sell them during the toughest times." The neighbour left, and suddenly Alexa understood everything. The picture in her head was complete. Apparently, Mr. Grady loved his house very much. That's why his spirit came to meet the new owners, and he deliberately let Alexa find them so she could sell them and save her son. Then he appeared and told her about the value of the gift. Alexa would have given the valuable item to the pawn shop, where they wouldn't have given her even a quarter of its full value. The amount wouldn't have saved Jack. But now she will go to the antique dealer. Something tells her that she will be offered a sum that will be enough for the surgery. Alexa suddenly smiled. "Thank you," she whispered to the house with her lips. "Thank you so much."